The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of AIHA. AIHA does not endorse any guest or the entity that they represent. On this episode of Healthier Workplaces, Fostering Global Safety, AIHA's International Committee's efforts to support OEHS professionals and worker health in developing countries. Welcome to another episode of Healthier Workplaces. I'm Bob Krell, founder and publisher of Healthy Indoors Media, and your host for this program from AIHA. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Paula Stephen, and this is my husband, Sean Hewitt. There we are. Yes, that's our little logo, shown smaller than the large corporations, but it's there right next to the Workplace Health Without Borders logo. This all started as something silly and fun, really. When we made a small donation and found out that even with a donation as small as the one we made, our logo could be on all the swag. We didn't have a logo at the time, so we made one. You've probably wondered about industrial hygienists at Half-Draft Acres, as you saw us flashed on all the screens at both face-to-face conferences and virtual ones. Well, here we are, just the two of us, two IHs, making a difference a tiny bit at a time. Industrial hygiene is close to our hearts. We both have a proud history of reducing injuries by ensuring workplace exposure levels aren't exceeded. And we care about what the future holds, since the average professional is about 43 years old, and since fewer students seem to be joining us, it's important to advance the profession by contributing to a scholarship that funds education and professional development in this field.
We're back live again from AIHCE 23 in Phoenix, Arizona for the Healthier Workplaces show. I'm Bob Krell, founder and publisher of Healthy Indoors Magazine and Media, and your host for the Healthier Workplaces show. Again, we're continuing our coverage with some live interviews from the expo floor. To welcome our guests for this special segment of the show, we have Lucinette Alvarado and Lawrence Svrjev.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Close enough?
Yes. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, anyway,
thank
you. So now that we got that awkward bad introduction part out of the way, you're here to talk about the International Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess first off, international OEHS professionals may have some unique challenges, right? Particularly in some of the developing nations where maybe there's not a lot of regulatory health and safety mandates, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So some of the stuff's voluntary. So I guess I'm going to pose this to both of you. Either you can take the lead on it. Shed some light on specific challenges that some of these professionals in these emerging nations might encounter, and some of the impact that might have on worker health and safety.
Okay. So, Lawrence, I can talk about Latin America, and you can talk about the other parts of the world?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, in Latin America, what I've seen, the biggest challenges are like the lack of resources. Most of these countries are underdevelopment countries, so the lack of information and resources related to occupational health and safety for some of those regions are non-existent. And then with that being said, then there are communication gaps too. Because it's not known, therefore it's not being communicated. And added to the fact that it could be also a language barrier if there's like communication between other countries, like United States and so forth. So that's kind of like the biggest challenges that I see in Latin America, Lauren. So what do you see in the other regions?
Okay, thanks, Lucinette. A fundamental starting point, if you talk to workers from developing countries, is the hunger for knowledge. It doesn't matter if you're working in a field, working in a factory, or a mine. You know as a worker that there are health and safety challenges. To articulate solutions, and workers have a lot of solutions. To articulate those solutions, knowledge is necessary. There's a hunger for knowledge, and that's where AIHA comes in, because we have specific programs through our entire organization, and in particular within the International Affairs Committee, to supply knowledge and mentoring to those who want to gain the knowledge and the ability for technical solutions to prevent occupational diseases, accidents, and fatalities. Well, it's a hunger for knowledge that I'm speaking to.
Okay.
Hunger for knowledge.
Okay. Just having the information and knowing what questions to ask, what to look for. Okay.
Yeah, which is common in Latin America. So as you can see, there's a pattern worldwide that lack of resources, that lack of knowledge, because the occupation may be not known. Therefore, everything can happen in the industries or agriculture or construction throughout the world.
So you could have an open pit copper mine in Mongolia, in Chile.
Yeah.
You've got artisanal gold mining throughout Africa. There are specific hazards to those industries, really obnoxious acids that separate the ore and separate out the metal of interest. And if workers don't know how obnoxious those chemicals are and how hazardous they are, they have no means for controlling them. So occupational and environmental health and safety professionals, we have that knowledge to transmit on how to protect yourself. Certain types of gloves are good. Certain types of gloves are just barriers that are going to break down. Certain types of eye protection might help, but if you're just wearing them for cosmetic purposes, they might not protect you from a chemical splash. That's where we come in as professionals to transmit that knowledge. So that's the starting point. We have knowledge to transmit. They have experience. They need that knowledge to protect themselves. And in between that is the responsibility of the different companies who employ them.
Yes.
Sure, and that's a big point right there, right? Because what incentivizes these companies in some of these areas to actually pursue worker health and safety, other than maybe enhanced profit if it would yield that for them?
Yeah, the incentive in some countries is non-existent. So
doing the right thing is
exactly.
It should be an incentive, but it's not
exactly.
necessarily.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. It's because it all depends on money in many of these countries, right? And also the government. Some countries are depending on that government, the type of government that they run the country, right? So at times, I mean, it gets very challenging. Through many reasons to get the corporations on the type of industries to do their due diligence, because unless it's regulated, okay, but when it's not, then it's like it depends on that culture or on the health and safety part of it.
Obviously, in North America, in the EU, in a lot of areas, they're fairly regulated. Worker health and safety it's mandated. It's not uncommon. I mean, you would have that. But like you said, in some of the emerging countries, that's not necessarily the case. They don't necessarily have those regulations. So in absence of some sort of a regulatory mandate, what will incentivize companies to actually pursue worker health and safety? I guess, it's like, how do we make those situations better for workers? What's the path there?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a great question, because that's one of the main challenges within each country, because it's like there's nothing. If it's not highly regulated, as you said, then well, what should we do, right? So I guess it will depend on the culture within the company and what type of goals they have, and also like their approach to health and safety. Unfortunately, in many cases, the lack of resources and the lack of knowledge, then that they're not existent. But I give you an example. Guatemala. I've been in Guatemala like around 2 weeks or so ago for the Pan American Congress, and I've been like studying what's going on in Guatemala just to have a better understanding on the country and the health and safety aspects of it. And they do have regulations. They do. However, they don't have necessarily like exposure limits. So I mean, you can read the whole regulation, and it's just like, yeah, maintain a health and safety environment.
So it's very abstract,
It's
kind of
super
subjective.
yeah, very abstract.
So they say we have regulations, but there's nothing really to enforce to because you don't have numbers. Or
Exactly.
anything. Yeah, okay.
And then I've been talking to the professionals during that Congress, and they share that the occupation per se is not existent. There is a regulation, but at times they feel lost because they know that they need to do something, but they don't know how to do it. Right, and then the occupational health and safety profession does not exist necessarily, and then they rely on occupational medicine or the health professionals to handle those type of situations, which is very interesting.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
It's totally different, really.
Yes, exactly. So Lawrence talked about the hunger. So the hunger of knowledge. So they do in Guatemala. They're very, very hungry.
But is this on the part of the workforce, or is this on the part of the employers, or both?
Both.
Because the employers actually are showing some responsibility there.
Yes.
They're just, okay,
Yes, it's in both. Yes.
So for the last decade and a half, I've mainly worked in construction, infrastructure construction, which means a uranium mine, building the infrastructure, processing plants, the roadways for a uranium mine. Didn't have the uranium exposure per se because we weren't in the mine.
Sure.
Right? Building hydroelectric dams in various countries, Indonesia, Niger, Pakistan, the island of Fiji. Some of these countries had very highly developed safety engineering regulations. Indonesia's one. They're exceptional. In fact, I'm going to state that for something like fall protection, the Indonesian regulation is the best I've seen.
Wow.
Okay? Safety engineering. Excellent. Their ability to prevent and quantify exposures to obnoxious chemicals. I just used the word, I'm not even going to say hazardous, I'll say obnoxious.
Right. I caught that earlier that you're using that term.
Obnoxious chemicals. They don't have, let's see, does Indonesia, I don't remember specifically about Indonesia, but the other countries that I mentioned, they have virtually nothing in the field of disease prevention regulations. Where they do, it's very weak. Now, in a couple of places, for example, Fiji and Niger in Africa, Niger, my experience tells me that is a direct relic of colonialism. You would think that that would be gone, but it's not. They haven't, the governments haven't caught up or don't have the ability to catch up. And something Lucinette said about the medical profession is particularly applicable. Many occupational diseases like silicosis, mesothelioma from asbestos, these types of things, they take 1, 2, 3 decades to develop.
Sure, very long latency.
That's exactly so. The latency period is quite long. So I'm working on a construction project. Right in front of our face is helping people to defy gravity, not fall to the ground and break their head or break their leg or whatever. Right in front of our face, electrical hazards. Right in front of our face, confined space, stuff that's immediately dangerous to life and health, IDLH conditions. For people in our business, right in our face, that's relatively easy to solve. Now consider this. Somebody's grinding cement, grinding concrete, silica exposures. Very difficult for us to quantify that. Regulations aren't there. The desire to do that stuff isn't necessarily there from the regulatory agencies, if the regulatory agencies even show up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And even if we develop that stuff for the 2 or 3 years we're there on the construction site, I'm speaking from an employer perspective, even if we document that, we write that down, we put it in our records, and we send it off to the medical doctors, what are they going to do with it in 10 years? It ain't going to be there.
Right.
Because they don't have an infrastructure to treat and develop, to follow and do the epidemiology for chronic diseases. That's a challenge.
Well, yeah, I can see where it would be. But one of the other points that just jumped in my mind here is, even if they don't have that much in the way of regulation, and how much they have in the way of regulatory enforcement. Because if you don't have that much in the actual regulations, are there that many people in the field that would even attempt to enforce what they have?
They're afraid. Yes. They're afraid because it depends on the type of government, depends on the type of economy. They may have consequences if they get speak out. They're scared of speaking out for the most part. Mm-hmm.
In the island of Fiji, now this goes back a decade, we had a serious accident on site. The inspector did drive the 2 or 3 hours it took to get there. He examined. He took about 2 or 3 hours to see what we were doing, our company, which was a Chinese company, and I was the HSE manager for that Chinese company. He took the time to examine what we were doing to investigate that incident, to make sure that the worker was going to survive, hospital care, all those things. And he looked at his watch and he said, Lawrence, you guys are doing the best you can. You're doing better than anybody else on the island can do. And I've got other more important business to attend to with companies that are not doing what you guys have the capacity to do. And he was gone.
Wow.
Now, those were local companies that he had to deal with. So as an international contractor, I was fortunate to be working with a company that said, we respect Fiji law, we respect Niger law, we respect Indonesia law. When we go beyond that, we do that. I was fortunate as a professional to be in that situation. That doesn't mean it happens every place. It doesn't, does it?
It doesn't.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's a good segue into what AIHA's International Affairs Committee is doing. What have you been up to? What's on the horizon? What are some of your goals and both short-term and long-term objectives? What you're doing with that committee?
Okay. So Lawrence, because I was the AIHA board liaison for the International Affairs Committee. My term just ended now, but what I could see from the outer side of the committee, these are a very active committee, and they're working with a lot of projects and a lot of outreach to promote the profession and also to get in contact with the sister organizations worldwide. For example, Australia, and then in Europe, etc. So Lawrence was the chair, right? You were the chair, now past chair of the committee. So he could provide a little bit more some of those projects or the outreach that you guys are doing.
Okay, so the International Affairs Committee of the AIHA is designed to bring the advantages of AIHA membership to people in developing and other countries. So in the last few years, we've established a situation where anyone from a developing country, and developing country, there's a criteria. The criteria is according to World Bank criteria for developing countries. So if you're a student from a developing country, you can join the AIHA for $10.
Which is a lot of money, though. To some
Yes.
people
It can
in
be a
some
lot of
developing
money.
country.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges we just had was we have an active member for a number of years, but in his particular country, in a former French colony in Africa, processing U.S. dollars was difficult for him. Okay, we can overcome that. We found a way to overcome that. And that's one of the things we do, because we know that there are people in developing countries who have certain challenges like the one I just outlined. So we're a friendly committee. We want people like this to come to the AIHA. So $10, $10 US for a working professional, $25 a year. All right. Now, what do they get with that? They not only get membership, a discounted membership, discounted fees for the essential knowledge bases of occupational hygiene. That includes the white book. It's about that thick, right? It's almost like the Bible. Various PDFs of different topics. For example, AIHA has a short document on preventing asbestos exposure, or ventilation for schools. Really important things like that you get for free. Critically, mentoring. Mentoring is built into that $10. So, I got personally, I was thrilled when I got contacted by a young woman working in an open pit copper mine in Mongolia. She said, "Would you be my mentor?" Right? Wow. And here's the flip side of that, Bob. I'm learning so much from her.
Oh, sure.
As the
that's
young
the way those things
professional.
work, though.
Yes.
That's the way it
Yeah,
works.
I mean, there's, and that's true. As a teacher too. When you're instructing, you do learn from your students if you have an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an open mind. And that's what we try to push in the International Affairs Committee. So is those things about gaining members for the AIHA, not just to make the AIHA a big organization. We have resources that they need, that hunger for knowledge.
Yeah. And I want to add two more things from the International Affairs Committee. They have the Ambassadors Program. Okay, this is a program where there's a representative for a specific country. It's pretty much they're going to provide updates on what's happening in that country from an occupational health and safety perspective. So, and then in the meetings that they have, one or two of those ambassadors present a report. Like, this is what they're doing, this is activities, events, etc. So we have a pretty good list of ambassadors. They're looking for 3 for Brazil, for Mexico, and Puerto Rico. So hopefully we'll get those fulfilled soon. And the last thing I want to mention for this topic is the micro grants, right? Yes,
So what are those?
Yeah, for micrograms, it's kind of like and Lawrence, you can pitch in too. It's kind of like a donation, like some type of like a grant, right? Like amount of money that is allocated for a specific project within that country. Okay, but this is not like we give this to anybody. So you have to go through a process. So whomever would like to participate or go through that process or interested in a microgrant, they have to submit a form. And then they have to describe the project and all the logistics behind it for that form, submit it, and there is a committee, right, Lawrence, that they evaluate those projects, and then they decide who will get those microgrants. And then they have to like follow up with them, right? They have to report.
Yep.
Lawrence, yeah.
So within the AA, we have the International Affairs Committee, and the Microgrants Committee is a parallel volunteer committee.
Yes.
$500 grant to some worthwhile project. Let's say in Bangladesh for an occupational health and safety committee in a garment factory. to teach, and they will put in a grant and say, we have this specific occupational health and safety need. I can't think of a specific example, but we're getting exposures to cotton dust. We don't have a disease in the United States anymore called bisonosis. When was the last time you heard of a bisonosis?
Never heard of it.
Right? It's an old one from textile mills and cotton dust.
In fact, we used to have textile mills in the United States.
Yeah, when they used to have.
We actually have a garment industry.
Right. But if you go to Bangladesh or a number of countries in Asia, Pakistan, India, etc., bisonosis is a real live disease. So people will, maybe they don't even know that word, bisonosis.
Admittedly, I'd never heard of it.
Never
before,
heard of
so,
it.
Yeah, you blindsided me with it. I was like,
It just popped into my head. Hey, what have I forgotten? Right? So that's something.
it's no longer forgotten now, Lawrence.
It's no longer forgotten. But that's the kind of thing that you get from doing a mentoring.
Sure.
That's the kind of stuff that it's not arcane knowledge. It's real knowledge that we don't have in front of our face. So a workers' health and safety committee might be talking about that. What can we do, right? And they will send in a proposal and say we want $200 over the next year to find a way to prevent that exposure.
Yeah.
Right? Really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a small amount of money. To them,
It's a lot.
it's huge.
Very
And
meaningful.
the benefits that they get and knowledge
Mm-hmm.
are even higher. These are astounding programs that AIHA has in place, and they're serious. They're vetted. They're followed through. We have dedicated people in the International Affairs Committee and the Micro Grants Committee. We follow these things through.
Yes.
What can the membership of AIHA do to help your committee, right? Your International Affairs Committee, because obviously your committee you're doing all this work, but you can't be the sole source of any of these initiatives. You need help.
Yes, exactly. So I have some ideas, Lawrence, and you can jump in. So first, Lawrence mentioned it before. It's just to become a mentor. Because there's especially like for students, there are a lot of students from different countries that come to the United States to have a career, and in this case, from occupational health and safety. So they just want somebody to back them up, to help them. So there are many people, or the membership here has a lot of knowledge, and then maybe, many of us are very busy, but some of us, like towards retirement of some sort, like they will have the time to mentor this young professional, so that they can have some tools and resources. And I've been talking with students international here with the AIHCE, and every time I talk to them, it feels so happy and so grateful that the interaction, and they have questions, and it's all about gathering with resources and networking, and they feel so relieved that they've heard of somebody with experience in the field. And the other thing that I was going to point out, also what the members can do, is if there's an open call from any project from the International Affairs Committee or an international outreach overall, to just, if you're interested, there's many people that like to promote the professional worldwide. So that's a good opportunity to reach out and say, oh, wow, okay, and respond to that open call. So what do you think, Lawrence?
What I think is that the field of occupational environmental health and safety, we're a friendly profession. We're a people, we all have a extraordinary technical base, but we're not limited to that technical stuff because we work with people, so we're friendly.
Yes.
We open doors for young professionals. We open doors for experienced professionals who need to upgrade their knowledge. The International Affairs Committee, we're not just concerned with outreach into the developing nations. We're also concerned with the fact that major U.S. corporations are part of the international economy.
Yes.
That's a given,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a given. They've got branch plants all over the world. Branch plants typically apply the same health and safety standards we have in developing countries to their operations over in other countries, typically, not always.
Yeah.
You're saying that they apply their standards that they use maybe in the U.S. in the other countries.
Abroad.
Right, because they have that's their corporate.
That's corporate policy, typically, correct?
Yeah, typically, yeah.
Okay.
Typically, they do. Now, why do they do that? Well, they have to do it because they have share owners and they have liabilities here.
Mm-hmm.
And a good corporation does not want to pass that liability and make people in another country sick. They don't want to do that, the good ones. It happens the opposite. So we, in the AIHA, all our members of the corporate community have a resource in the International Affairs Committee and with our partner organizations like the Occupational Hygiene Training Association, Workplace Health Without Borders, Developing World Outreach Initiative, the Maquiadora Network. Our partners have connections elsewhere too, and we work to coordinate all those efforts. So corporate members of the AIHA who have operations abroad can come to us for resources to help them educate their own workers.
Yes.
Makes sense. Any other points that we should cover here?
Like other
Is
points?
there any other bullet points that you have there? Because I can't read it from here. So
I mean, we can share some success stories, right, Lawrence?
everybody loves a success
Yes,
story.
yes.
Even though bad news travels better.
Yeah.
Positive news is uplifting.
Yeah. So, you have one, Lawrence? I have one.
Go, you go first.
So, the International Affairs Committee has this desire of giving back. So we're reaching out through the sister organizations to talk about what are the needs within that country. As I said in Guatemala, that was a fantastic event. Because the AIHA was there, which is another organization.
International Occupational Hygiene Association.
Yes, it was there, and then the AIHA was there, and also the these are organizations within Latin America, from Colombia, Mexico, everywhere in Latin America, and it was just a good start of great things. It was very, very well attended. Plus, the participants were like 200 or more, which is fantastic.
Okay.
Yes. So, and it was so good. Meeting with everybody there, to me, is a success story. Because as I said, a lot of good things will come from that, and it's in Latin America.
And that's in Latin America, so let's touch on that for a moment. We had a what we called a town hall earlier this year. We had 60 international attendees from all continents except a couple of frozen continents.
This is a virtual town hall or in person?
It's a virtual. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, participants from 60 different countries. Portions were bilingual. Lucinette gave her portion in Spanish and in English. Yesterday we had a substantial annual business meeting of the International Affairs Committee. I don't have the final count, but based on appreciation of the room, we had 60 to 80 people in the room. And one person, a new attendee, asked a question. What about language? Suppose somebody is not fluent in the language we're using in this room, English. The answer was, we commit that anyone who wants to participate can communicate in their own language, and we will find a way to make that a universal language.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an interesting question because we really hadn't. And then our past chair from Belgium, his name is Stephen Verpali. Verpali said, we run into this all the time in Europe. So we're having a conference in Europe, and we're using English because it's a little more universal than some other language. But people from Poland were participating, and they weren't fluent, particularly fluent in English, and they wanted to drop out. And we created a situation where they could speak Polish, and we translated and got the stuff across. We're an international affairs committee, and we have a commitment from AIHA leadership to create a world that is safe and healthy for workers. Language is not a problem.
Right.
Or language is a problem, and we will overcome
Right.
it.
It's not. You're not allowing it to be a barrier.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes, and from an AIHA standpoint, they're acknowledging that as well. So the resources that we have for international, they're free of cost or like very, very discounted prices. We're starting to offer it in different languages, right? And then we have a presence online with a web. One of the pages is completely in Spanish. So, and then the different documents and literature that we have, some tools they've been translating not only in Spanish but also Chinese and Portuguese, and so AIHA it's also on that path. Mm-hmm.
The role of the occupational hygienist in a pandemic is in 3 or 4 languages now. English, Portuguese, Spanish,
and
maybe one other. I'm not sure.
yeah, okay.
Portuguese. So now that's not just Brazil. That goes to Angola.
Okay.
So we have a commitment. AIHA has a commitment. The board has been fantastic. They support our initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
So from top down.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and that's certainly impressive and essential, right? If you don't have that support, you're not going to be able to drive, drive this forward.
Drive it.
Mm-hmm.
Our International Affairs Committee has won Outstanding Committee Award a number of years in a row.
Yes.
And we also, I have to throw in a couple of other things. We recognize our own. We just awarded one of the profession's outstanding persons, Lydia Renton. We developed a Lydia Renton Award in her name.
Wow.
Lydia has a very long history of selfless voluntarism. Extraordinary modest person for all the work she's done. At our international reception last night, our current chair clanged the glass, and 60 or 80 or 120 people stopped their drinking and their hors d'oeuvre taking and congratulated her. And Lydia came back with an extraordinary statement. The height of professional development is giving back through voluntarism. That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what Lucinet does. That's what I try to do. That's what our members do on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. In addition to working hard.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And again, what you're doing is, I think, essential to bringing, improving standards, workplace standards globally. Mm-hmm. And that's super important.
Most people know that there's this thing called the World Health Organization and the International Labor Organization. The International Labor Organization has existed since 1919. It was one of the first iterations of the League of Nations and the United Nations Organization. They've been basically, since 1919, workers and social rights, like equal wages for equal work, no discrimination in the workplace, stuff like that. 1 year ago, just about 1 year ago, they came up with a fifth convention, the right to a safe and healthy workplace. That is now inscribed into international law.
Nice.
And the United States, country that I come from, Canada, most countries of the world are signatories to that. The right to a safe and healthy workplace is an international legal standard that the United States has signed on to. That provides great inspiration for us in our work and a solid background to what we do.
Absolutely. So, Lawrence, Lucinette, thanks so very much for joining us here on this special edition of Healthier Workplaces.
Yes, thank you so much.
Everybody shake hands.
Oh.
Oh, look at that.
So that's our show for this week. We'll be back again with another episode of Healthier Workplaces. Until next time, I'm Bob Krell. Stay healthy.